Hey friends, it is Jenna, what is up, and welcome back to the Board Game Garden, and welcome to a preview of this game right here. This is Knitting Circle. It is published by Flatout Games, who is sponsoring today's video, so a huge thank you to them, and it is designed by Emily Vincent. And this is a Calico game. So if you've ever heard of the game Calico by Flatout Games, this is the next in the series of these games, and it has a very similar feel to it. It's very puzzly, it has a very cozy feel to it, so it kind of is along the lines of Calico, and I am super excited to show you guys this one today because I am a huge fan personally of Calico. So if you guys want to hear more about Knitting Circle, then just keep on watching. I will have the link down in the description box to the Kickstarter campaign if you want to go and check it out. When this video goes up, it is already live, so definitely go and give it a look if Knitting Circle sounds like something that you would enjoy. Also, give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoy. Hit that subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. And without further ado, let's get into this preview of Knitting Circle, a Calico game, shall we? All right, so getting into a little bit of an aim of the game, as well as all of the components here in front of me, which I will say right now, all of the components are prototype and subject to change, but a lot of them are pretty close to what the final product is going to be. Flatout Games always makes some really nice prototypes, but as for the aim of the game, every player is going to be competing to make the most garments and ultimately have the most amount of victory points at the end of the game. And you are going to have your little furry feline friend, your cat, along the way to help you. So each player is going to be playing as a different cat. So we have Earl Grey, we have Calico, we have Midnight, then I believe this is Snowball. So you have your 4 different colors there, and each player is going to have their own little player board here. So that's pretty much a little bit of an aim of the game. But as for the components, we're gonna get right into that. We have, like I just said, all of the different player boards here. You're going to pick what color you want to be, and then you're going to have your main board here where you're going to have your buttons in the center. You're going to have the 4 spaces along the top that are going to be the 4 spaces that you're going to be drafting each round. You have a spot on the right side for your grabby paws, which you will be able to use those throughout the game, which I will explain. You also have this little basket here, and each player does start with 2 of these little knitting sections in your basket, and then along the bottom it has a really great player aid telling you the different phases for each round and then what you're going to do at the end of the round as well. So that is your main thing there, and then each player is going to start with a different garment, which I will point out over here that there are 6 different types of garments. You have your mittens, socks, hats, sweaters, scarves, and long johns, and they are going to be various lengths, and you'll see why that is the case in a second. But every player is going to be able to draft one at the beginning of the game, and this might be depending on the buttons that they have at the beginning of the game or the objectives here that I will get into. But you are going to start with 1 garment, and you can have up to 2 garments that you are working on at the same time. So you have these little knitting needle tokens here that you're going to place at the top of each of the garments that you are working on currently. So that is the full setup for each player. Over here, I've already pointed out the garments, which you have 6 different types there. They are face down, and then when you do get those, you are able to take 2 and then choose 1. So those are the garments there, which I will explain. And then you also have the bag of the knitting sections in here. They are in 6 different colors, the same 6 colors that you have here with the garments. So you have a light blue, a dark blue, purple, pink, green, and yellow, and they are splayed out here in the middle. And then lastly, you do have over here another knitting circle. The one that I have currently out is for 1 to 2 players, and then this one here is for 3 to 4 players. Then you also do have the little score pad as well. You have the main box here, and then over here we have the objective cards, which I will explain, and we have these different components here. So you have your buttons, which you have square buttons, triangular buttons, as well as circular buttons, and each player is always going to have 2 of each of those buttons in their play area. And then lastly, you have these negative tokens here, which I'll get into, and then you also have more of these grabby paw tokens. So those are all of the components there, and then additionally on the side here I do have the other 2 player colors. And then lastly over here, like I just mentioned with the public objectives, you do have more of them here as well. So that is everything for the components. Very quick. I will also mention that each player does have a little cat token that is going to start on a specific spot on the knitting circle, and you're going to place out 2 of these patches on each of these spaces. They're just going to be randomly taken out of the bag. And then there's also going to be 6 in the center. And then the starting player, which is going to have this first player token here, is actually going to be able to swap one of these sections with one of the ones in the middle. So for example, if a player may be looking for yellow, let's just say this player wants some more yellow, they might decide to actually swap out this yellow for, let's say, this purple. That's going to actually get discarded, and then this yellow will take its place. All right, so that is everything for all the components in front of me here, as well as the aim of the game. So let's get into exactly how Knitting Circle is played. All right, so getting into exactly how Knitting Circle is played, it is played over 6 rounds, and you're going to be keeping track of those 6 rounds by the tiles that are in the center of the knitting circle. So 6 of them started, and at the beginning of each of those rounds, the starting player is going to swap out one of those. And then once there are no yarn tiles in the center of the knitting circle, that means that there are no more rounds, and that is going to be the last round. So that is how you keep track of the rounds. And then each round is going to be played over 2 phases. So you have the drafting phase, and then you have the action phase, and then you have a little bit of a round end upkeep, and then you'll go into the next round. So the first phase, like I mentioned, is the drafting phase. And this is going to be where each player is going to be taking turns, starting with the first player, and they're going to be moving their cat and then drafting one of the yarn tiles. You're going to be doing this 4 times, and you're going to be collecting those 4 yarn tiles and placing them into the 4 spots above your board. So I might decide as the orange player here to move 2. I'll go 1, 2, and then I will collect this yarn tile here, which you will notice that the yarn tiles are double-sided, and they are actually 2 different sides. So you have the purl and then you have the knit, which this one here is on the purl side, and you have to keep it on the side that you drafted. So every other space here is going to be knit and purl. It is important which side you are drafting it as, because what you drafted as is going to be how you have to place it into your little garment here, because you have to go back and forth. You have to go knit, purl, because the only way for you to fit these things in is that if it's that specific side. So that is simply what you're going to do. You're going to move your cat 1 to 2 spaces. If you ever have a cat in front of you, you actually get to hop over them. There's only ever going to be 1 cat on each space. So if I was to move now, I would have to go over this gray cat 1, 2 spaces, or just 1 spaces, whatever I would want to do. But you would move 1 to 2 spaces, jumping over any cats that you need to, and then you're going to draft 1 of the yarn tiles. So moving into the action phase, this can be done in turn order, but you can also do this simultaneously once all players have a hang of the rules. But there's going to be various things that you can do during this phase. So there are actually 5 different things that you can choose to do on this phase. The first one is going to be starting a new garment. So everyone starts with 1 garment, but you can decide to actually get a new one, and you can have up to 2 at a time that you were working on. And then once you've completed a garment, which is going to be one of the other 5 things that you can do, you will then be able to gain a new garment to work on. So in order to do this, you do have to discard the color of garment that you want to pick up. So for example, this player here might decide that, hey, I would really love a pair of long johns. So they could actually discard one of their yarns of that color, so that light blue color, and then they would take 2 of the long john garment little cards here, and then you'd be able to choose one of the 2, which I will kind of explain what is going to be on a garment card. So you have the type of garment that it is. So this one is a pair of pants or long johns. And you have the different sections here that you're going to have to place these yarn tiles in. And you will kind of notice that there is a line at a specific spot, and that is going to be the minimum that you have to fill in order to complete a garment. You can decide to place further than that and actually complete an entire garment. There actually might be some of these goals that you can go for that require you to complete one. There also might be some little bonuses at the bottom of these garments that require you to do a full garment, but if you get to that line, that is the minimum that you're required to finish, you will get the victory points or the garment bonus that is at the bottom. So this one here, if I got to here, I would gain 5 victory points, but if I did continue, I could either get 7 victory points or 9 victory points for this garment here. And you will also notice that some of the places are going to have some bonuses once you place a yarn onto them. So this one here would be that I would just get a random yarn tile from the bag, and then this one down here would get me a grabby paw token. And then lastly, I've already mentioned, but at the bottom you're going to have those garment bonuses, which are going to give you additional victory points for doing something. So this here would be an additional 3 victory points for every sweater that you completed. And then this one here is 2 victory points for every garment that you had with stripes, which another thing that I'm going to mention when it comes to garments is that there are going to be different patterns that you're needing to do in order to have a garment be complete successfully. So you have to do one of these patterns, or you are going to get one of these negative little tokens here. So this is going to give you -3 victory points at the end of the game for every garment that you are not able to successfully do some sort of pattern on. So the 4 different patterns that you're going to be going for are going to be stripes, which is just going to be going back and forth between 2 colors. The second one is color blocking. So this has to be blocks of various different colors, and each block has to be at least 2 yarn tiles in size. And then another one is going to be symmetrical. So this is going to be that if you cut it in half, each of the different halves are going to be the exact same. So for example, that might be purple, blue, yellow, purple, blue. So it's kind of symmetrical on both sides, if that makes sense. And then the last one is going to be solid. So that's going to be a garment that is just fully one color. So those are the 4 different patterns. And like I said, you have to have each garment be a pattern in order for it to not get you negative victory points. So you will still score for it, but it will just give you -3 victory points at the end of the game. So that is going to be everything for the different patterns and for starting a garment. The next thing that you can do is just simply knit, and that is going to be adding one of your yarn tiles to one of your garments. So for example here, this garment starts with a pearl, so I might decide to start it with this yellow pearl here, and then I could go in and actually add in a yellow knit to the next space. I might decide, hey, I want this to actually be a solid mitten, so I'm going to go pearl, knit, and then you will notice that you have a basket on your main or your personal board here, and you actually have some yarn tiles in here. You start out with 2 at the beginning of the game, and these are going to be yarn tiles that you can decide which side you want to use. So I actually have a yellow one here, so I might decide to use this as another one, and I'm going to actually cover up a spot here that allows me to pull out a random yarn tile from the bag. So I might decide to do that, or I have to do that. You're going to take it, that is going to be added into your basket. So again, that's going to allow you to decide which side you want to use of that. So every yarn tile that you place into your basket, you actually have the choice of which side you want to use, but every yarn tile that you draft and it goes above your board, it has to stay as the side that you drafted as. So that's everything for the knit action. You are just simply adding your different yarn tiles onto your garments. The next thing is going to be flip. So this is when I mentioned that you can't flip the ones that you've drafted, but you can, if you would like, if you discard another tile. So I could decide to discard this tile in order to flip this green one from knit to pearl. Obviously you are missing out on, you know, the yarn tiles that you had, and you're going to have to discard more. But if you are needing a yarn tile to be a specific side, then you might have to discard one in order to flip it. And then the 4th action that you can perform during this action phase is going to be the grab action, which this is where these little grabby paws come into play. So if you do have a grabby paw, you can decide to discard that, and then you're actually allowed to look into the knitting circle bag, and you are actually allowed to take out a specific tile that you want. So in this situation, I actually might want to discard my grabby paw in order to gain my last yellow tile. I would put it onto the knit side because that is the side that I need. I would put the last of my knitting tiles here, and that would actually complete my full garment, which is this mitten here. And that actually goes into the last action that you can perform on the or during the action phase, and that is the completing a garment. So the first thing that I would do when completing a garment would be I would remove my knitting needle, token from that garment. After that, I would then check on my button tokens. So the button tokens are kind of like personal objectives that you're going for with each of your garments. So you have your circle buttons, which are focusing on the colors of your garments. You have your triangle buttons, which are focusing on the patterns. And then you have these square buttons that are going to be focusing on the types of garments. So I have the circles here, which one of them is asking for green and light blue garment. The other one is asking for dark blue and yellow, which looking at this, maybe I should have gone for a mix of dark blue and yellow, but I did go for full yellow, which that is okay. And then looking at my triangle buttons, both of them are wanting a striped garment, which again, I focused on a solid garment. And then lastly, for the square buttons, these ones are looking for specific garments. So I have a long john button, and then I also have a mitten button. So I would actually be able to successfully kind of use this button on this mitt. I would actually put that onto the mitt, and that would get me 1 victory point at the end of the game. So you can actually apply one of each shaped button to each of your garments. So if I managed to match the type of garment, the pattern of garment, as well as the color of garment, I would actually be able to place all 3 of those buttons onto that garment. But in this situation, I simply just got my square button. I would then, any button that I used, get a new button. So I would get a new button, place that onto my board, and then for my little garment bonus here for finishing my mitten, I would be able to pick a random yarn tile out of the bag and then place that into my basket. And then lastly, for completing a garment, you would look at the pattern of your garment. If you didn't match any of the patterns, you would take one of these negative tokens and place it on, and that would get you -3 victory points at the end of the game. But in this situation, I did successfully get a solid garment, a solid yellow mitten. So I would take this. You can do anything with it that you want, but I usually kind of place these over to the side after completing, and then that would be the end of my action phase. And then lastly, moving into the kind of cleanup phase of each round. So after every player was finished with all of their actions, you would move into this cleanup. So any of the yarn tiles that players still had above their board that they didn't use, those would actually be placed into the basket. And then you are going to have to discard down to 2 moving into the next round. So I have 4 here, so I would have to decide which ones I wanted to discard. Maybe I decide to discard these 2 light blue ones, leaving the yellow and the dark blue there. You would refill your buttons, which I did kind of do it a little bit early, but you would refill any of the buttons that you used during that round or placed onto a garment that round. And then lastly, you would prepare the central basket for the next round by taking more yarn tiles and placing them out correctly around the central basket. Once all 6 rounds have been completed, you would then move into some final scoring, which the first thing that you're going to score for final scoring is all of the buttons that you placed on the various garments. You're going to get anywhere from, I think it's 1 to 3 victory points for each of those buttons. You will then get the base victory points for how far down you got on each of your garments. You always have to get to that minimum in order to score your victory points, but you could go further than that minimum in order to gain more victory points. So you'd count up all of the base score for each of your completed garments, and then each garment that had a bonus, you would count up the victory points for those. So for example, with this one here, I have 3 victory points per hat garment that I had completed. Next, you will get -3 victory points for every one of these negative tokens that you had. Hopefully you don't have any of those. And then lastly, for scoring, if you are playing with the slightly advanced variant, which I do recommend playing with it because it's very fun, but that is the kind of challenges or public objectives that you have here. So at the beginning of the game, if you do want to play with this advanced option, you will pick 3 of these kind of challenges or public objectives. And basically what's going to happen is it's going to ask for a certain thing. So for example, this one here, which is the pattern master, says the first person to get 5+ pattern buttons on garments in any combination is going to be first. They're going to gain 4 victory points and they're going to get a grabby paw. So that's only for the first person to complete this. You would flip it over, and then any other player that had this at the end of the game would then get 4 victory points, and they wouldn't get a grabby paw. So You just are trying to get first in order to gain that additional grabby paw. But yes, any of those would be added up at the end of the game as well. You'd go through and see any of the public objectives that you have accomplished. You'd gain victory points for those. You would count up all of your victory points or add up all of your victory points, and the player with the most victory points would be the winner of Knitting Circle. All right, friends, so that is going to be everything for today's preview of Knitting Circle. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up. Also hit the subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. Be sure to go and check out the Kickstarter campaign for Knitting Circle. I will have it linked down in the description box if you want to go and check it out. If it sounds like Knitting Circle is something that you would enjoy. I love you guys so much. A huge thank you again to Flatout Games for sponsoring today's video. I love you guys so much. I'm pretty sure I've already said that, but remember, you are somebody's reason to smile, and I will see you in the next board game video. Bye, friends.